Chapter 55. Harry had been going back and forth between staying with the twins and staying at the newly renamed kennel at Grimmauld Place with Sirius and Remus. That night, he happened to be with the twins, so the next morning he had breakfast with them and saw them off to work before pulling out his portkey to the seaside property. He hadn't seen it himself yet either. He'd just gotten a report from the elves that it was being kept up and the basic information about it. When he got there, he looked around in awe. It was beautiful, still too fancy for his taste, though. He looked around a bit before he noticed the time. Tom and Arthur were supposed to be there at 9. Harry didn't know a lot about wards, but he knew how to key other people in. He'd had to do that at Potter Manor for the twins after all. He took a second to key in Tom and Arthur and then opened the flue. The connection had been dead since his parents died, but it was relatively simple to reconnect and put him back on the logs at the flue registry. He would have to visit if he wanted to change the flue address, but if things went well, that would be on Arthur and or Tom. He hadn't been long finished when the flue flared, and Tom came through first, followed by Arthur. They spent a little time looking around before Arthur said, "This is much bigger than we need. Really, we only need the ballroom area. All the infants can sleep together in there, and they won't need room to run and play like older children. The changing rooms around the ballroom can be converted into bedrooms for the caretakers, and the parlor can be used for storage and the kitchen. You are correct for the most part, but remember the first while we'll be getting older children as well. While I'm relatively certain, we've already taken care of most, if not all, over the age of 5, since they would likely have done accidental magic by that age. There will be children too young to have done so. For that time, we will need a larger space." "That's true," Arthur nodded. "But maybe once that's taken care of, since we expect a quick turnaround with the babies, we can pull back and only use the ballroom area, have a separate flue connection, and separate it from the rest of the house so it can still be used by Harry or for other things." "That's something to consider," Tom nodded. "But we'll see how things settle. I still have a year left at Hogwarts where I won't be able to come here anyway, so that's plenty of time to see what you need. Don't feel like you have to condense space for my sake, though. The kids come first," Harry told them. "And honestly, I don't see myself coming here very often anyway. I have another beach house in Italy if I want to spend time at the ocean." "I do believe we'll take it then, Mr. Potter," Tom said with a grateful nod. He then coached Harry through taking down the current wards and then started putting his own up. He started with a basic hiding ward to keep the property from being found before they were done, and he would bring the goblins in to do the rest of the wards later. It would take him days to get this place as secure as he wanted, and he just didn't have the time. Since that was settled, Arthur felt the need to mention the report he'd gotten this morning that could cause them problems. "Do you have time to go over a few issues I've run across?" he asked Tom. "Or would you rather do that at the ministry?" "Here is fine," Tom said, "and you're welcome to join us, Harry." Issues meant that they'd hit a snag, and Harry was good at coming up with alternative ideas and thinking outside the box. Probably his twins rubbing off on him. "Okay, sure," Harry agreed. "But first," he called one of the elves for the property and asked for a tea service for the 3 of them, and it arrived less than a minute later. "All right, so I've had my people canvassing Muggle orphanages in preparation for our first babies to switch, but it seems that the Muggles have very few infant orphans. One of my people asked some discreet questions, and it seems that infants usually get adopted immediately, and there is even a waiting list for them," Arthur said apologetically. Tom considered the matter for a few minutes, but it was Harry that had the first idea. Would it hurt the kids at all to be de-aged? Tom turned the idea over in his mind. "There is a de-aging potion that is safe to use on infants or to take people to infancy. I'll have to look over the formula and make sure that it would work on Muggles. Not all potions do." "Is that, I don't know, crossing a moral line, though?" Arthur asked worriedly, perfectly aware of who he was talking to, but unable to not make the point. "I don't think so. As someone who grew up in an orphanage, I can honestly say that I or any of the children wouldn't have done anything for a family. De-aging and forgetting all the hardships we'd suffered as well would just have been the icing on the top. Even good orphanages have trouble keeping enough food and clothes, and even staff to help the kids. We would be giving them a good life. That does bring up the explanation of missing children in the orphanages, though," Tom said, still thinking through the whole idea. If we can get someone into the Muggle Child Services office to delete the files, the orphanage staff can be obliviated and the paper files taken with them, Harry suggested. That is likely to be our best option, Tom nodded. He had only brought that up to see if anyone else had ideas. That would have had to be done no matter the age of the orphans they took, and he'd already had that idea. I do have a few people in that sub-department that know muggles and computers. Arthur struggled over the word that he'd recently learned. It would be better to get the Imperius on someone, Harry said hesitantly. He wouldn't have hesitated bringing that up to Tom, but not Arthur. Those computers probably have firewalls and passwords galore. At the blank looks on the others' faces, Harry said, think of them like wards that only let certain people past. There are very few people able to break through them. Like ward breakers, Tom nodded in understanding. Most of his research into the Muggle world in recent years was more along the lines of their offensive and defensive capabilities. He just hadn't had time to learn it all. But the Imperius, Arthur said nervously, biting his lip, is only an unforgivable for the possibilities that it brings to make people do horrible things, Tom told him. Even auras are authorized to use them in wartime. We would just be sending someone a list of files to delete to save children and then make them forget it. I see your point, but I don't think I could ask someone to do that, and I can't cast it myself, Arthur said apologetically. I wouldn't trust anyone but myself to do it regardless, Tom told him. That was the hardest part he was finding about being minister, having to trust other people to do delicate work. He was getting better at it for simple expediency of not having the time to run the entire country single-handedly, but some things he still preferred to do himself, like this. Okay then, Arthur nodded in acceptance. When should we expect the first group? Severus should be getting me the names by end of day tomorrow, so as soon as you can begin pickup after that. I'll spend today and tomorrow getting cribs, diapers, and formula arranged and set up here as soon as the wards are up. I should be able to get the goblins seeing to them by the end of the day, and the deaging potion only takes a few hours to brew. We'll need a lot of it, but if I pull all the ministry's potions brewers for today and tomorrow, we should have enough to get them all and still have a stockpile for future births, Tom said. I'll work on arranging the wards and do the research to find the best person to Imperius and then pass you their name. Then you'll just have to get them a list of the children you've taken. That decided, they got up, leaving the elves to clean up their finished tea, and Tom and Arthur headed back to the ministry, while Harry spent a little time looking over the place more fully. He had at least another hour before Sirius and Remus would be awake anyway. Usually he spent the time studying, but he could take the morning off. Chapter 56. Tom got back to his office and went down to the potions brewers and told them to drop everything they reasonably could and brew 24 full batches of the Belby de-aging potion and deliver them to Wizarding Child Services when it was complete. It was also to be kept top secret, and he even took an oath of them for it. He would see about implementing loyalty oaths for all employees at some point once he had time, but for now, he would just call for specific oaths when necessary. That done, he made his way to Gringotts. The goblins were best dealt with in person, and for the Minister of Magic to attend them personally would be seen as giving them great respect, which would get him great respect in return. That visit ended up taking an hour going through the different ward options and which ones interacted badly with which others. During that conversation, it became known what the wards were for which ended up getting them a discount. The goblin race considered children to be precious, and the fact that Tom clearly agreed with them on that, not to mention the lengths he was going to in order to save so many children, meant that their honor wouldn't let them charge the gouging prices that they usually charged wizards for wards. They charged enough for their wardmasters to make a reasonable profit, but that was all. His final visit of the day was to the central office for the Muggle Child Services. A minor compulsion charm, while questioning people and getting him in the doors, soon led him to the office of the man he needed. He was quick to cast the Imperio and give him his instructions, and then left a linked journal that only he could see. The names would be written in the journal, and he was to delete them from the system, and then cross them out as they were deleted. He would also send a message if for any reason he was unable to delete them, or if he was replaced. In the case of he first, they could leave a golem of the children dead for someone to find. Too many would be suspicious, though, which was why it was a backup option. If he was replaced, Tom would just come and imperious whoever took his place. He stopped for a late lunch out before going back to the ministry. He went to Arthur's office first, glad to see people bustling around already busy. He gave the man the other linked journal and told him how it was to work, and let him know that the wards would be up by the end of the day, and that he would have charmed badges for his employees to get in and out of the wards. Arthur took a moment to show him around the office and explain what people were doing, knowing that this was Tom's pet project, and he would appreciate the information. The caregiving department is currently working on ordering the supplies to care for the children and to furnish their own bedrooms. The adoptions department is currently processing and filing applications. There are two different categories, one for one without children, and those are ordered according to the age of the elder parent from oldest to youngest. The other category is for those with children and is first come first served. The final department is split between working up a schedule for the files you already sent us of the kids you rescued before, making visits to the older Muggleborn's parents and spelling them to secrecy, and helping out the other two departments as needed. Through here is a set of ritual rooms for the blood adoptions. An excellent and efficient setup. Tom nodded in acceptance, thanking him for the tour and update before heading back to his own office for the day. The reports from all the departments were in on their current staffing, and he spent the rest of the day and the next shuffling people around, using their personnel files to find the best fits. It was like working on a large, annoying puzzle. By taking the less effective people from the overstaffed departments, he was able to get all departments functioning at an acceptable level. He decided against putting in an ad about job openings to get them to full capacity. He hoped that enough Muggleborns could come back to the wizarding world to fill them out. Not only were they more likely to be efficient, but it would prove to those on the fence that there actually were opportunities here now. It was mid-afternoon when he was scheduled to meet with the team that Director Bones assembled to find the adult Muggleborns, and he swept into the meeting room and got right to business. Here is a list of all Muggleborns who have attended Hogwarts in the last 150 years. Since wizards had a life expectancy of closer to 200, it would be needed. I want you to split into two groups. One group will start with the oldest and work your way down. They are likely to be frustrated with pandering to the short life expectancy of Muggles and being retired far too young, or even finding new identities to live under once they pass normal age. The other group will start with the youngest and work your way up. They are more likely to still be wide-eyed idealists and wouldn't have fully settled in the Muggle world yet. What exactly are we to tell them? Someone asked. There is a stack of letters on this table. You will each take one and duplicate it as needed. It explains the current change of policies and that Muggleborns are just as welcome in our society as purebloods, so long as they complete an orientation to the Wizarding World course, which will last 2 months and be paid at minimum wage. They will then be free to take any job that they are qualified for in our world. It also explains the need for the course and the dangerous state that magic is in due to our abandoning of our traditions. Should they have additional questions, you are to reassure them as much as you can while answering them, but keep in mind that you will have many people to see, so try not to take hours or more with each person if you can help it. We maybe have some people doing research to find them and the others just doing the visits, Tonks asked. It is up to you to find the most efficient ways for you to do things, but that does seem like a good idea, Tom nodded to her. Any other questions? When no one said anything, Tom wished them luck and swept back out of the room. Once he got back to his office, he sat down with the rest of the list that Severus had sent him. This one was of current Hogwarts students and younger. Since the new headmaster didn't know which ones that Tom had already saved, he would have to go through the list himself and remove them before forwarding the final list to Arthur. Most of the switches of the children would take place at night, so he wanted it to him in time for him to delegate it to the correct teams before he left for the day. Everyone had been taught the spell to change the children's genetics for Muggle purposes and the correct doses of the de-aging potion based on current age. Once he was finished, there was a list of 300 children, all under the age of 5. It had been about what was projected given the normal rate of birth for Muggleborns, but looking at it like that seemed quite daunting. They wouldn't be able to get them all in one night. It would likely take at least a week, maybe more. He would let Arthur know to start with the oldest and work his way down. They were the most likely to do accidental magic sooner. Arthur knew that he wouldn't be able to work all night every night, but he at least intended to be on hand for this first night. Tom was the same. He had every intention of seeing this through and making sure it all went smoothly. They eventually delegated. Tom wasn't a fan of being around children for all that he was so intent on saving them, so he would stay at the ministry while Arthur would be in place at the nursery, managing the incoming. They wouldn't start the pickups until 10 p.m., so both men went home right at 5 p.m. and took a long nap before returning. Dinner was had while waiting, and Tom had taken a good portion of his work down to Arthur's office, so he would be closer to the action, so to speak. He'd left a note on his office door as to where he was if there was a minister-related emergency during the night. The first group arrived at the nursery just after 11. They were all 5 years old and were settled into bedrooms on the first floor and put to bed. 4 people from the not yet busy home visit department were staying with them, and monitoring charms were put on the bedrooms as they slept 4 to a room. They were also put under a calming charm until things could be explained to them. They would have a difficult adjustment, but that was why they had mind healers available. These children would be unlikely to remember much of this once they were older, though. The older children were the more complicated to replace and required obliviations and compulsion charms to keep them from noticing the differences and make both parties think that everything was as it had been. Thankfully, that wouldn't be necessary after this group. They would be getting them at or near birth in the future. They managed to get all the 5-year-olds and most of the 4-year-olds by the time the sun started coming up and they were quitting for the night. Those that had worked through the night went to bed, while those that had been there for the sake of the children, but sleeping, got up and started breakfast. Arthur stayed until all the kids were calm and eating before he went home and left the caretakers with instructions to flew him if he was needed. He kept in contact with Tom over the course of the night to keep him updated as well. Thankfully, it was now Saturday, so they were able to get some more sleep before getting on with their day. Chapter 57. Tom woke up mid-morning to find a message in his journal from Harry asking how the first rescue went. Tom spent a little time updating him and gave him permission to go visit the kids and help out if he wanted to. They could probably use all the help they could get at the moment, and a younger, friendly face might help calm the frightened ones. Harry arrived to chaos. The adults were trying to calm and distract the children that were crying for their parents, and it broke Harry's heart. For the first time, he started to wonder if they were doing the right thing, but he forced himself to remember why they were doing this. He looked at all those little faces and wondered which of them would have died in the next 5 years. Which of them would have been beaten so badly that they lost their magic? They could bounce back from this with love and compassion, but abuse left lifelong scars. Even if they weren't visible, he should know. Harry quickly figured out that all the ones currently trying to help them were purebloods. All of the Muggle-born and half-bloods with knowledge of the Muggle world had been on the overnight shift to navigate the Muggle world, picking them up. He pulled aside the person who seemed to be in charge and told him, "You're going about things all wrong." "What do you mean?" he asked shortly. Normally he wouldn't have had such an attitude, but he was so exhausted and frazzled by this point that it came out harsher than he'd intended. These are /Muggle-born/kids. You want to distract them, show them some magic, something flashy and fun. They haven't grown up with it, so it'll be fascinating to them. Then you can take them aside in smaller groups and talk to them about the situation, Harry pointed out. Right. Okay, he said, relieved. That sounded like a much better plan than what they were doing, which wasn't helping at all. They had used the calming spells to get them through breakfast because they needed to eat, but it wasn't good for them to keep the calming spells up for longer periods. I'm also gonna go pick up some appropriately magical toys that will keep their attention. We didn't get much in the way of toys since they won't be here long and the rest of the kids will be babies, the man admitted. I get that, but they'll still need something. You can let them take their favorites with them when they go to their new homes, Harry said. He knew that the ministry didn't have an unlimited budget, and what they had was spent towards things that would be used long term. He didn't mind blowing some of his fortune on this, though. Thank you, Lord Potter. the man said gratefully before moving back to the group and spreading the new plan. Harry went back to the flue and headed to the wizarding toy store first, making sure to get things that would hold the children's attention in such a situation. Buying for a couple hundred children drew some eyes, but everyone knew about the Muggle-born rescue. It had been all over the papers, so they assumed that's what it was for. The toy store even gave a discount. Harry's next stop was the twins, shop to shop from their line of toddler-appropriate merchandise. They, of course, tried to get him to take it free, but he demanded to pay at least cost given the size of the order, so they accepted that compromise, and he cleaned out their shelves. They would be working overtime restocking that section. Harry also had every intention of loaning them his time Turner to get it done. He did that relatively often anyway, so that he could get more time with them before he went back to school. He got back to the nursery 2 hours after he left to find things much calmer. They had apparently made it through lunch, and 3 of the caregivers were putting on a magic show to distract most of the kids who seemed enraptured, while the rest of them were taking the kids aside one-on-one to explain things. Harry unshrunk the bags of toys, seeing that the 3 putting on the show were getting tired. Using that much magic non-stop wasn't easy, and they had probably been rotating out that job. Once the toys were passed out, that did the job of distracting just as well. By the time all the kids had been taken aside and had things explained in a way they could understand, they were sad but accepting. They were still prone to tears, but not scared and inconsolable anymore. An hour after Harry returned, the overnight crew was awake and helping out as well. Not long after that, a large group of people came through the fireplace. It was all older people, well past their prime. Those that didn't have heirs and were looking at their family line dying with them. Ones that would much rather older children that would be easier to keep up with at their age than infants or toddlers. Harry was surprised to see Aberforth Dumbledore among them. The staff sat back and took an observing role, as did Harry, as the older people came and interacted with the children, looking for a connection. These children already had their own personalities and interests and would need people who could connect with them on that level. Whenever a connection like that was noticed, when a child and adult seemed to gravitate towards each other, one of the staff moved over and took them aside to talk about possibilities. All the kids knew from their private talk that they would be being adopted soon, so it wasn't much of a surprise. Some of them were being difficult, of course, and refusing to participate, demanding their parents, so they would be given a little more time to settle. Most of the kids were accepting, though. Kids were adaptable that way, and all of the adults were understanding about their attachment to their birth parents and weren't going to try and take that away. Harry enjoyed watching them, but spent most of his time playing with the ones that weren't currently adoptable and refused to go near the prospective parents. He kept half an eye on that group as they slowly paired off, and after a long conversation with a caretaker, made their way back to the ministry for the blood adoption ceremonies. About a quarter of the adoptable group were left, and they were a little sadder than before over not having been chosen, but the caretakers were very understanding and told them that it was okay and there would be more people coming tomorrow. They promised that someone would pick them soon. Harry left when the kids were sat down for dinner and headed back to the apartment to make dinner for the twins. Tom didn't bother staying up for the second night of rescues, but he did leave instructions for Arthur to flue him if he was needed, and for Winky to wake him if he was flued. Arthur fully intended to stay up for it, and arrived at the nursery at 10 p.m. to give the crew a nice pep talk before they headed out to work. That night, they got the last few 4-year-olds, and most of the 3-year-olds. Some of the 4- and 5-year-olds had already been picked up after doing accidental magic before Tom took over as minister, but very few 3-year-olds had done so, which meant it would be going slower from this point. Children born to magical parents were more likely to do accidental magic earlier since they were exposed to it from birth and knew it was possible, but Muggle-born tended to start around 4 or 5. Sunday night, knowing that he had to work Monday with the other departments, Arthur just set his alarm for every 2 hours to check in. Most of the home visit department were still helping in the nursery during the day while the night crew slept. Once they had the bulk of them picked up, it would be much easier to manage. They would be getting the newborn Muggle-borns list once a month forwarded from Snape, and it would only take a few people to do the overnight switches. The home visits wouldn't be taking place so soon anyway. They would give the kids a week or two to settle in first. Arthur had put guidelines into place as to what children to get from the Muggle orphanages as well. With the de-aging, they would lose all their current memories, and he wanted to make sure that those who had fond memories of their parents prior to being orphaned wouldn't lose them. They were going for the younger ones first, the ones that wouldn't retain those memories anyway if they even had them. When and if they had to get to older children, their files were to be checked to see how recently they were orphaned, while the ones that still had memories of their parents would still be in the system and potentially have a more difficult life. With fewer orphans to begin with, they were at least more likely to be adopted or fostered in nice homes. Once they were getting the average 50 a year, it would be easier to keep it to the younger Muggle orphans. But this was a huge load at once, so they had to be careful. Arthur's conscience demanded it, and he was given the freedom to set those parameters himself, so he would do as much as he could to ease the way of these kids. Regardless of the dubious morality of some of the situations he was put in, he knew that he was doing much more good than harm, and that helped. Anyone who had ever raised children knew that there was no such thing as black and white, and sometimes moral compromises had to be made for the children's best interest.